But let's talk about Joe Biden, shall we? Because he was up just a couple of hours ago, Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Apparently he's going to be making one big appearance, which is what he's just done. But he looked pretty engaged. He looked like he knew what he was saying. He looked like a man that was completely in control of all of his faculties. Let's have a watch and see what we make of it.
I made a lot of mistakes in my career, but I gave my best to you. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return with the support of the American people. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president.
I mean, American politics is quite weird, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's all about I gave my heart and soul, for this country. And, did you really? What about the 27 million, Joe? And they're all shouting, "Thank you, Joe." Yes, chanting.
This is a love-in. It's at the conference, Democratic National Conference in Chicago, and it's just a love-in. It's a moment just to say thank you. And he's now passed the torch. He's going to exit. He's going on holiday with his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, getting away from that report, of course, by the House GOP. And then, of course, the baton passed to Kamala Harris, and we're going to hear from her. She's going to accept the nomination formally, and then she's going to be speaking on Thursday. That's Thursday set aside for her speech. It's 50,000 people. America do things completely on a different scale. If you think in a Labour Tory conference, around
I mean, I must
17,
admit,
18,000.
I was once at the Democratic National Convention in New York when Bill Clinton got the nomination in 1991, and it was incredible. I mean, I have to say, it was one of the most incredible kind of events I've ever covered. We're expecting
a few celebrities potentially to turn up as well. But that's Joe Biden done. He's going off on holiday, and of course there are going to be questions about why doesn't he just pass the torch over to Kamala Harris?
There was a story at the weekend that he might just resign as president before the election, making her the incumbent, making her the president, so that she would have an even better chance of beating Donald Trump. But let's have a look, because a lot of people have been critical of the Democrats right now in terms of how they've just completely waltzed over and stamped all over democracy. They didn't have a primary, they didn't have a choice. They were all told that Joe Biden was going to be running, and then suddenly he wasn't, and she's suddenly the nominee. Let's have a look at what he says.
I stand before you now on this August night to report that democracy has prevailed. Democracy has delivered. And now democracy must be preserved.
Pretty funny coming from a place where they had no democracy to pick who's going to run as the candidate.
No, it's interesting, of course, Barack Obama, the former president, wanted there to be an open process. He said in his statement when Joe Biden stepped down that he thought there needed to be an open process. And also, Kamala Harris hasn't taken any questions. Can you imagine in this country?
Not even one press conference.
Not one press conference, because, of course, her aides are worried that she'll come out with a word salad, which is, of course, going to be used by
which is kind of what she does every time she does anything, right?
Yeah, and so will they now put her up to some sort of scrutiny? You couldn't imagine Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak going through the last election campaign, going weeks without facing the media or facing a question from a journalist. It just wouldn't happen. But they've kept her away. They've hidden her away.
They can't do it forever, though, can they?
No, they can't. And, of course, they won't be able to, because we've got that debate next month with Donald Trump, and that's going to be the ultimate test. I'd have thought they'd have wanted to have some sort of practice run, even if it's a couple of hostile questions, from journalists in a press conference.
But I guess the problem is that when you're in that position and when you are able to manipulate the democratic process as much as they have, they probably think they can just continue to manipulate the media in the same way that, sorry to bring these characters into it, but Harry and Meghan, go on this tour of Colombia. They took one journalist from Harper's magazine, online edition, and didn't allow any other journalists to see what they were doing. And that's obviously what an awful lot of politicians would quite like to do.
Yes, and you'd think that actually it would help the campaign if she could nail the points that she wants to, but there is a concern that she isn't able to stand up to that kind of scrutiny, even from those within her own team, and that's why she's not taking the questions. But now that she's got the formal nomination, so there couldn't be any wobbles before she gets the nomination formally. Once they get over this week at the convention in Chicago, then there really are no excuses. There's no way of hiding her away. They need to front it up. And Donald Trump, to be fair to him, he has taken questions.
No, Donald Trump's constantly out there taking questions, doing interviews. He did a thing with Elon Musk last week, which, you know, some people would have said perhaps wasn't as rigorous an interview as you might have wanted. You know, I think I was getting a lot of pelters on online because I said, you know, it's not exactly, you know, Frost Nixon, is it?
No.
You know, and it was really, really kind of amateurishly done. But let's move on to Keir Starmer, because he was a bit tetchy yesterday in Northern Ireland. He went over there to talk about all sorts of things, including the football. The Euros apparently coming to Northern Ireland and Britain in 2028. But let's get a voice note from Mark on Keir Starmer.
Good morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. I can see Starmer's up to his old tricks again, saying nothing to see here with Sue Gray. Well, as far as I'm concerned, there's going to be nothing to see here with Starmer for the next 5 years. I think we can save everybody the trouble of listening to anything he has to say, because it's just going to be, you're all far right, you're racist, nothing to see here, this is nonsense, this is racist, you're far right, dearie me, give us a break, Keith.
Listen, this is how people talk about Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. I mean, who would have thought that after Rishi Sunak you get somebody who's even more unpopular? But Keir Starmer really is. He's
going down in the favourability ratings. He actually had a bit of a bounce after the election, didn't he? He went up to sort of parity in the favourability ratings, and now it's slipped right back again after. And with tax rises in the autumn budget, there's a real sense that it could get worse for Keir Starmer.
Well,
of course,
we've got a story in the front pages of the Telegraph today saying that electricity energy bill is going to go up £150 in the autumn. We were told by many now cabinet ministers, were we not, that this UK energy company was going to save us all, you know, £300 to £400 a year. It then got broken back to sort of, well, maybe over 5 years, and then finally they're all kind of going, well, actually, you might not save anything.
Yes, and that's a problem, because it's a broken promise. You know, and this was actually something that the left of the party were concerned about with Keir Starmer when he ran against Rebecca Long-Bailey, who was the heir to Jeremy Corbyn, and they were worried that Keir Starmer wasn't keeping to his promises, because he made a number of promises during that campaign, such as scrapping university tuition fees. And then once he won and became leader of the Labour Party, he suddenly abandoned all of those promises. So we should have known. There is a form.
We should have known.
There is a form.
I think we've got a clip of what he said before the election about energy. Let's have a look.
Now, clean British power is, renewables, which is about a third of the price of fossil fuels at the moment, and that ought to bring down the household bills by about £400 for each bill. But that's a permanent drop. This is the big difference, I think.
Yes, a permanent drop. Well, unfortunately, that turns out to be a load of old cobblers. In fact, it's going to go up by 150 quid.
And they had actually been at their lowest level for 2 years, energy bills, on top of the fact that the vast majority of pensioners, only about 1.5 million, are going to be left with this benefit, are going to be left with the winter fuel allowance.
Yes.
They're going to lose that. And that's going to be huge, because they're not only going to see their bills now starting to creep up with what Ofgem's about to announce in terms of minimum energy price, but you're also looking potentially at, well, we know they're going to lose their winter fuel allowance as well. So it's going to be a double whammy.
And we saw yesterday, and we got an awful lot of calls on this yesterday when I revealed, as one of the papers did yesterday, that the cabinet, including people like Ed Miliband and Angela Rayner, have been claiming for their heating bills from their second homes all the way through their time in opposition, and they'll continue to do so, sometimes to the tune of about £1,000 or £2,000 a year. And people are going, that's disgraceful. It's hypocritical. We all know that MPs have got expenses, but they shouldn't be claiming for electricity bills on their second home, should they?
No, I mean, but those. The MPs make their own rules, and that's what happens when you end up in a system where they're able to.
But that's not a good look.
It's not a great look at all. No, it's not good at all. Especially when people are really struggling. And
I said yesterday, look, you know, it's not just Labour. I mean, you can find plenty of Tories and Lib Dems and everybody else who's doing the same thing. But it's more hypocritical for Labour because they've taken away the winter fuel allowance for pensioners.
And they said that they wouldn't do it.
Right.
And they were very clear before the election that they were going to stick up for pensioners. And this wasn't something that they were going to countenance. I wonder actually whether, you know, when you look at the momentum of the campaign to actually try and reverse this decision, actually when we get to the budget, whether Rachel Reeves, because it's not due to kick in until October, Rachel Reeves actually turns around and thinks this is too politically damaging, especially when you put into context the fact that the unions were looking public sector pay rises of up to costing the taxpayer £14 billion. Actually, to spare pensioners, it's only around £1 billion of savings. Somebody in the Treasury, or, you know, whether Rachel Reeves or Starmer look at it again and think, actually, actually we can't do this. It's going to hurt too much.
Right, exactly right. But they're quite cruel and they're quite sort of ruthless when it comes to policy, and that's what we've learned from the Labour Party in the past. I'm going to ask you in a minute about Sue Gray and what's going on behind the scenes, because I'm interested in what you know about it. But let's have a look at what Keir Starmer said yesterday. He was in Northern Ireland sort of talking about a whole bunch of stuff, and he was asked about Sue Gray.
And just on Sue Gray, on her position casement has apparently been causing divisions. Can you offer some clarity on that?
Yeah, that's complete nonsense. So I hope that's clear enough.
That's going to come back to haunt him, I suspect, because it's clearly not complete nonsense, because the Sue Gray problem is a problem. Dan Hodges, even, you know, who's a Labour apparatchik, and he won't mind me saying that, wrote a piece in the Mail on Sunday saying Keir Starmer's going to sack this woman before she ruins his government.
So there's a split between Sue Gray, Chief of Staff, and then Morgan McSweeney, who is the Director of Political Strategy.
Right.
And the particular... Why this relates to Northern Ireland is there's this £300 million redevelopment of Casement Park, which Sue Gray has reportedly been trying to drive through. And people are saying, hang on a moment, what's your connection and why are you so keen on this? At the same time, Morgan McSweeney in Downing Street has had his desk moved twice further away from the Prime Minister's office. He's been shut out.
And that's classic kind of, you know, gerrymandering of the office, isn't it?
Yeah. And you push his desk away, then it's harder to get access to the Prime Minister. And then we have reports that actually quite senior officials are trying to come to Keir Starmer and say, well, actually, we need to tell you about this, Prime Minister. Can we have 5 minutes of your time? And Sue Gray then jumps in and says, well, I'm really sorry, no. It can come through. You can run it through me first. And that actually maybe decision making is being slowed down because Keir Starmer isn't getting the information firsthand. It's all having to go through Sue Gray. And there is pressure. And if you're looking at, you know, the feeling in Westminster is, if he has to sack one, whether it's Morgan McSweeney or Sue Gray, Morgan McSweeney, from a political point of view, gives him another 5 years in office potentially. Sue Gray, it manages Whitehall. She knows Whitehall very well, but there are others who can do that job and who end up sacking Sue Gray.
And if you're supposedly going to run a government of service, which is starting to look even more ridiculous, you know, with every passing day, you know, you can't really have a sort of, you know, bully boy or bully girl at the top of it saying, you know, actually no, I'm just going to keep batting you away, I'm just going to keep refusing to help you, I'm just going to keep being very, very sort of cold, calculated and cruel about how we run this government. And that's not what he's meant to be doing, I'm afraid.
No, he said on the steps of Downing Street when he became Prime Minister, country first, party party second.
Well, that's gone for a Burton, isn't it? You know.
But it was the same with Rishi Sunak, because Rishi Sunak came in after Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and said, I'm going to restore accountability and integrity. And then the whole narrative became when all the journalists are sitting there going, where's your accountability with that? Where's your integrity with that? You have to stick to that message, because if you deviate from that message, then it comes across as failure ultimately, because you're not keeping your word. And that's the danger for Keir Starmer.
And that's why so many people have lost faith in all politicians. You know, they just don't care. I mean, Keir Starmer has never been more unpopular, and yet he's the most popular politician in the country, which is incredible, really.
It's a problem for the Tories, because only one of the 6 candidates that they've got, Tom Tugendhat, actually beats Keir Starmer when it comes to public favourability ratings. But, you know, these numbers can change. They're there to change, and they exist to change. And actually, if the Tories manage to pick somebody who's half decent and who actually can take the fight to Keir Starmer, then it's game on. At the moment, it feels a little bit like Keir Starmer's able to do this and get away with it at the moment because there isn't the opposition in place. But that honeymoon period where the Tories actually are at 6s and 7s and they don't know who their leader is and they don't know what direction they're taking, they're worried about Nigel Farage and they're worried about the Lib Dems. At some point that's going to come to an end, and they will be able, you would think, to sort themselves out. It may take a few months, it may even take a few years, but at some point it's going to happen, and then that's a problem for Keir Starmer if he's still doing this, if he's still carrying on without really thinking very carefully about the perception and the way it looks to the British public.
And I think, as many people said at the time, the biggest opposition to Keir Starmer is actually going to be within the Labour Party, not outside of it. Theo, thank you very much indeed. Theo Usherwood there with his take on the big stories of the morning.